Imagine standing at a crossroads where any choice you make would feel absolutely irreversible, where silence is excruciatingly heavy and the next step could define you forever. I'm going to share with you a crossroads that I was at in my life. It was the choice I made to have an abortion. It was a decision I made out of isolation and fear, but unexpectedly met with a journey of healing and divine redemption. It wasn't just my story, but it's also a story of God's grace and mercy that reached down deep past my deepest regrets. In the quiet aftermath of our choices, we can often deal with shame and condemnation and ask the question of, can beauty really come from these ashes? Well, join me as I share with you a personal story of mine where I came from making an irrevocable decision to then finding my voice in a larger story than my own. I was able to experience life and loss and ultimately the power of God's love. So join me as I dive deep on today's episode with Sip and Sew with Ashley. So what provoked me to share my story was because I was actually invited to be a part of a music video called Plead Their Case. I'm going to dig more into that storyline a bit later of just how God totally orchestrated those string of events, and honestly, super blessed to be a part of it. But initially, it's a story about a young woman who is in college and she finds out she's pregnant and she, has her own aspirations. She's feeling like, oh my gosh, how can I have this baby? And just really feeling overwhelmed and all the things. And so before I can tell you the story of being a part of the music video, I will back up and actually share with you my story of why I chose to have an abortion. So at the time, I was in college. I was not a Christian. I was 20 years old, and I was actually dating a guy, and we had been dating for, I think, almost a year. And in that time, I thought I was going to marry this guy. I was like super serious about him. And I had what I thought my life was going to be like. And then I found out I was pregnant. And finding out that was extremely shocking, overwhelming, and I honestly just didn't even know how to process what I just found out. And I just didn't even know how to see my life with a baby at that point in time. And I think what even solidified that mindset was the fact that in that time and in the friends that I had, it was a common thing that people had pill abortions. And I knew friends that had pill abortions. It wasn't really, in the crowd of friends that I was in, it wasn't seen as a shameful thing necessarily. I mean, it wasn't also a thing that you would like shout from the rooftops either, but it wasn't necessarily something that you would be shunned for in the group of friends that I was with. And yeah, so I think that actually kind of fed into just me being like, well, I can't do this. Like, I just don't even know, how to go about it. So that was literally the only option that I thought I had. And then on top of that, the guy that I was dating at the time also didn't want a baby as well. And he was also in college. And so it just it was never an option to actually keep this life. And, even then, actually, I have a memory of, me after I found out. I remembered I called one of my best friends and I was like, I told her what was going on, and she was like, she was dating somebody else at the time, and I talked to her and her boyfriend at that time, and I remember both of them saying that they had gone through an abortion, but they actually regretted it and wish that they hadn't chosen that. And in that conversation, like I was moved that I didn't even know that. And then I was moved that I was hearing that. But I actually I think the only part that I really accepted was like, well, they did it, so it's not that bad. It couldn't be that bad kind of thing. And I didn't really want to hear the part of, oh, I shouldn't have done that, kind of thing. And so, yeah, all that to say, I feel like it just wasn't, I just, didn't have that mindset of this is a horrible thing. And again, especially how the culture paints it. Even now, I think even now it's a lot more intense and a lot more just, yeah, I would just say intense. I really don't know what other word to say, but it was just normalized in the time that I was in. And so anyways, that's whenever I decided, okay, like I cannot do this and I need to fix this problem in my life. And so at that time, I decided that I was going to go to Planned Parenthood. So I walked into this Planned Parenthood, and the first thing that I actually noticed was that literally the entire room is filled except one seat. And I was by myself. And so, yeah, I walked in and I was like, okay, I guess this seat is for me. And later I actually found out that Planned Parenthood, the one that I went to, had specific days that they did abortions. And in fact, they would give college students a discount, which, at the time I was like, great. But looking back, I'm like, oh, that's horrible. That's just feeding into that narrative of not choosing a life. And so anyways, I sit down and I'm just a nervous wreck. It's quite interesting looking back where it's like you're nervous about something, it feels wrong, but yet somehow your mind justifies the decision. And that's just really crazy to think about, looking back. And so anyways, I sit down and then I actually ended up sitting by a girl that I knew from high school. And in high school, I kind of saw her as like an older sister figure. And I remember her turning to me and she's like, hey, she could clearly see that I was in complete distress. And she turned to me and said, hey, like if you need to talk about anything, like let me know. And I just wanted to die in the chair because I was like, oh my gosh, she clearly knows why I'm here. And and I don't know if she was there for the same thing. She might have been there for a friend or something like that, but I just, yeah, like she was offering, her support of just, she's here to talk to, and I was just dying inside. And then shortly after, I get called to the desk and they give me this packet that they're like, okay, here, read this. And so I get this packet and it is like super thick. And essentially it's a packet that basically lists I don't even really know, because honestly, I didn't even read it. It listed like, I know that it listed some complications that could happen or whatever risks involved. And it probably lists and said other things. I just don't even recall reading it. And I just remember kind of like flipping through it gradually and just being like, oh my gosh, like, I just hope everything is fine and goes fine and that I just want to be done, And I just remember as I was going through that packet, I was just feeling excruciatingly like just nauseous and nervous. And I couldn't even control how my body was really reacting to this emotion. And so I actually had to step out of the clinic and I just kind of vomited a bit behind the clinic and was just out of just being super nervous and scared. And so then I come back inside and then after that, I end up going to the back and lo and behold, I actually knew the person who was handing me the abortion pills. She also went to the high school that I was in. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is just like the walk of shame. But yet here I am still like going through this. And so anyways, that was kind of the swirl that I was feeling while being in Planned Parenthood. So after leaving Planned Parenthood, I actually headed over to the person I was dating, his house, and I took the pills that I needed to take, and within like 15 to 20 minutes or less, it started activating in my body, and I began to feel just literally the worst pains ever. And I can honestly say it was probably one of the most traumatic experiences in my life, physically, emotionally, kind of like, I think sometimes, like, if we're feeling something super traumatic physically, our brains can actually disconnect and just like act like we're not there, kind of thing. And I feel like that was in a sense of what happened. Not completely that way, but in a sense, because in that process, I just remember like the guy I was dating, he just didn't seem to really know how to respond to what was going on. And I felt like he probably was just overwhelmed. And then after everything, was done, we literally didn't talk about it at all. Like, we didn't acknowledge it. It was like it never happened. And I think that initially is kind of a callus that just came over this traumatic experience in my life. And, it was kind of like it was easier to kind of see it that way, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, it was just something that we just didn't acknowledge. And honestly, it wasn't until I, just decided to, when I gave my life to Jesus and turned my life around, it wasn't until then that I actually began to process those emotions and just ask the Lord, like, God, help me process what I went through, and help me, really see like what actually was hurting me and that sort of thing. And that was definitely a journey in a sense. I mean, I'm grateful to say that I didn't spiral into a depression, but I definitely did feel this guilt and this like secret that I had. But even after I got saved, I didn't keep the secret necessarily. Like, I would share it with people who, maybe needed to hear it, or maybe was, they were going through that at one point in their life or whatever. But it was still something that I did feel ashamed about. And so anyways, I definitely do feel like God took me on this journey of like, hey, like, let's heal those things that maybe you were trying to ignore. And then let's also deal with the shame and the condemnation that you are feeling as well. So since then, for the past 10 to 15 years, giving my life to Jesus and Him ultimately transforming my life, my heart, redeeming my story, and ridding me of shame and condemnation. I got married and happily married to my lovely husband, as he's sitting right here beside me. And then ultimately just being invited to be a part of this music video. I kind of feel like it's just something that was full circle of like my story of having an abortion, and how God honestly just gently invited me to this opportunity. I don't feel like He was pushing me, but I felt like it was an invitation of Him to just bring my story into full circle, and also help me to bring it into the light, to share with those who, one, might be contemplating the same thing, or share with those who have maybe gone through the same thing. But yeah, so I'm just really, really honored to have been a part of this music video. So in me sharing my story, I've continuously felt the Holy Spirit free me from shame, condemnation, and even embarrassment as I am sharing it so publicly. And honestly, I really feel like the Lord is getting the glory, because He is the one that has done the work in my life. He is the one that has transformed me, has redeemed me, and has redefined me from what I was. So if you are one who can relate to what I'm sharing and you've had an abortion, whether it's a pill abortion, whether it was a surgical abortion, I just want to remind you that God isn't angry with you. that in the time that you chose to have an abortion and you were feeling pain and agony and confusion and, whatever circumstances that you found yourself in, that he was actually in pain with you and he was crying with you and he was totally present in that moment. And in fact, I want to also remind you that in the next life, whenever we are with Jesus forever, that when you see that child again, that child is not going to resent you. That child isn't going to come to you with anger or unforgiveness, but in fact, that child is going to look at you and they're going to see you in total righteousness, that they're going to see you with the eyes of Christ. Or maybe you're watching and you were considering having an abortion and you find yourself at a crossroads where, just as I was, and you're asking yourself all these hard questions of like, man, I can't picture myself with the baby. My circumstances do not even favor me having a baby right now. Well, I just want to remind you that God isn't surprised, that he is not caught off guard by this life being conceived in your womb. And in fact, he has already created and crafted a story for this life, for it to be a beautiful story, whether it is that you keep this baby or you choose to give this one to another family to love. God has already orchestrated this whole thing. And it reminds me in Psalms 139, where it talks about how he sees our unformed bodies, that he has knitted together, like he's knitted us together in our mother's womb. And so the one that is inside of you right now, this life, that God has already seen his or her body inside of you and already knows what their life is going to be like. So I just really hope that encourages you and that it would just cause you to think about that precious life that is inside of you. I also want to quickly add that if you are contemplating an abortion or you are suffering trauma from having an abortion, please go to themoraloutcry.com for resources, and they would be happy to help you. So before I hop off, I wanted to quickly add how Born and I have been working on our first worship album together. And we actually went to Boston to record our first single, so we're super stoked about that. And actually, we've been, doing music together for the past 10 years or so it's been quite the journey. If you would like early access to our first single and updates, please click the link below and we're happy to share with you. Until next time, have a good one. Bye!